Sure.
Yep. Testing, 1, 2. This is working.
Oh, the mic, yeah. Press this.
Yeah, it is.
Test. Right?
Testing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Check 1, 2. Good evening, folks. If we could please just settle down. Good evening and welcome to the Joint Finance Committee for the Bristol Warren Regional School District. If we could all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, I would appreciate that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Folks, if you could just please stand me for 1 second. We lost an integral member of this committee. It was our town clerk, Rhonda Fortin. She sat by my side not only for 4 years, helping me, shepherding me, and if I get a little emotional, I apologize. She was also my clerk when I was the chair and the vice chair of the zoning in the town of Warren. So if we could have a moment of silence for her, I would really appreciate it. Thank you. Please be seated. So good evening and welcome. It's that time of year again. My name is Steve Calender, and I will be your chair for this meeting for about 4.5 minutes because we're moving into a new budget season and we'll have a new election of officers. So I have a little bit of housekeeping that we need to do from previous meetings, and I like to always start my meetings by introducing who is on the committee and who is in attendance. So as you can see, seated directly across from me, we have the chairman of the school committee, Nikki Piper. Good evening, Nikki. Welcome. Good to see you. We have the superintendent of schools, Anna Riley. We have the treasurer of the school committee, Jessica Almeida. Good evening. And then coming around, we have the members of the Bristol Town Council. We have Mary Perella. We have Aaron Lay, Tony Texera, our town administrator from Bristol. Good evening, Steve. It's good to see you. Steve Contente. Tim Sweeney, and Nate Calero. And then we have our council president from the town of Warren, John Hanley, Kerry Cronin, and we have our town administrator, our town manager, Kate Michaud, and this is our lovely clerk who will be doing the minutes. Thank you very much. Oh, and Lauren Securo, thank you. Also, we do have some other guests. I see members of the committee from the school committee. Thank you very much. Our assistant superintendent. We also have Sarah Hassel and Kyle Carulli, our treasurer and deputy treasurer of the town of Bristol. So welcome. I see Adam McGovern. I see Kylie Reish. And if I missed somebody, I apologize. The glasses are new. They do work. And I can see everybody the best I can. So thank you. So moving forward, our next meeting that the committee has decided to go with is going to be March 23rd, 2023 at 6:30. That was agreed upon by all the members, and we're letting the public know that that'll be the next meeting. That would also be the opportunity for once the school committee administration puts their budget presentation on, that you could get public input from it. You shaved. You shaved your mustache, Mr. Jackson. You shaved. I see you, though. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Yes. So next on the agenda, we have the acceptance of the minutes from the March 16th of 2022. These minutes were disseminated amongst all the members, and if there are any corrections or anything that we see that was out of place, by all means, please bring it to our attention. Was there anything that was out of place? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Here's the good part. We have the election of a new chairperson who's going to take the place of me because I will be not serving on the joint finance anymore. So I am going to open up the floor for nominations. Are there anyone who would be nominated for the position of chairman of the JFC?
I nominate Tim Sweeney.
Second.
Second. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, I'm going to close the nominations. I'm also going to ask the secretary to cast one vote unless somebody objects, because I'm going to make it unanimous, unless someone objects, that it's a 9-0 vote that Mr. Sweeney has been elected as the chairman of the Joint Finance Committee. Thank you. Congratulations, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Well, it's an honor, and I'm glad to be on board. I want to first take a minute to thank all my Bristol and Warren colleagues for their vote of confidence. I hope to live up to your expectation. I also want to take a minute to thank Chairman Kalinda for his 4 years of service. You helped us lead us through COVID, and that wasn't easy. There was a lot of changes going on, but you kept us steady through it all. So if we could just take a minute and give Chairman Kalinda a hand and thank him for his service. I really appreciate it.
I thank you very much. It was my honor to serve. I truly do appreciate it. Understanding how the budget works between the two communities is a Herculean task. So I wish you all the best of luck. I am going to say goodnight because I do have another meeting that I need to get to on the other side of the state. I am fully confident that the joint finance is in great hands. Good luck. Godspeed. I'm a phone call away at any time. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All yours, guys.
Thank you. You don't have to leave so quickly if you don't want to. You can stay around, stick around, and enjoy the fun.
My wife just had surgery this morning for a torn ACL, so I also have to pop in and see and make sure she's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a busy day. Good night, guys.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
See you.
On a personal note, as chairman, my goal is to not only serve the advancement of the schools, but both communities. We are all in this together, so that is very personal to me. Moving on to the next part of the agenda, we have the organizational meeting. We are meeting to discuss, first off, the housekeeping. I think Steve already went over it. We will be meeting on Thursday, March 23rd at 6:30 to take action and a vote on the FY24 budget. And at that time, I want to call out that we will also have the public address. Any questions that they may have will happen at that meeting. Tonight's meeting is mainly to understand and absorb the budget information. Thinking ahead to the FY25 budget meeting, could we pencil in 2 budget meetings? The first meeting, if you guys could just check your calendars, we could do a Thursday, February 29th of 2024, or a March 7th, 2024 at 6:30 at Mount Hope High School cafeteria. So that's our first reading. That is where the superintendent will give us the presentation on the
So you said the
FY25.
29th of February or the 7th of March?
correct.
I don't have a babysitter.
Both of those days are free for me.
Okay. Okay. We'll just think about that. We'll need somebody to make a motion on, but just hold to that. I'm going to just bring out the second meeting where we take action and a vote would happen Thursday, March 14th, or the 21st at 6:30 at Mount Hope High School cafeteria. So I would just need a motion to that effect if we're either, what dates you guys are leaning towards. So just, if there's anything.
Either date works.
Either dates,
Anybody have
either
any
dates.
conflict?
Either dates. I know
We're
our
just doing
budget.
informational stuff.
Well, the
Did I
21st
just
may be
make a-
cutting too close to the budget workshop.
I just wanted to make a comment on the, either one is fine. I mean, the 29th might be kind of fun because it's the 29th. But on the second one, I mean, I'm always concerned because we don't usually start our budget until around the 20th. And I think the 14th would be too soon to come to a final agreement on this. So I would either go with the 21st or slightly later. Did you say that was a Thursday, Tim?
That is a Thursday, correct.
Okay, so we would
Yep.
probably start our budget probably that Monday. So that would be okay. That's kind of like this year, but that's my worry about doing it too early.
Okay. So would I be hearing correctly that the first meeting would happen March 7th, and then 2 weeks later, we would convene again on the 21st?
I thought it would be kind of fun to do the 29th of February.
Sure, sure. Isn't that, that's
Have
leap
fun.
day, right?
Right? We want to have fun.
You want to have fun, it only happens every 4 years.
Yeah. That what everybody wants to do on a leap day?
Mhm.
The only concern,
Doesn't matter to me, really.
the school vacation was that week this year, right? Would that be the same for next year also?
Oh, I don't
don't
know.
know.
That's a good point. I don't know.
Maybe we should go with it.
That's too late. It'll be the week before. It's
Okay,
usually President's
perfect.
Day week.
29's okay with me?
All right.
Doesn't matter to me. It's the second.
29th, 21st.
29th, 21st.
All right, great. Could I just have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion from Nathan and do we have a second?
Second.
Second?
Yep.
Okay. From Lang? Great. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, that's 6:30.
Those are
6:30.
both at 6:30,
6:30.
correct? Yep. Thank you very much. All right. Moving right into the next part of the agenda is the presentation. So good evening, Superintendent Riley. I was wondering, I'll just go ahead and yield the floor over to you to start your presentation.
Thank you. And so I have the double pleasure of being both your superintendent this evening and your CFO. We are looking for a new CFO, and I'll use this opportunity to advertise that fact. If anyone's interested, it is posted on School Spring. But I will do my best to answer all of your questions that you may have tonight and to be prepared to answer questions for the public at our next meeting. So this is our presentation that has been approved by the school committee at our previous meeting. Of course, all of our work is focused around the objectives of our strategic plan. The school committee has approved these 5 objectives that we have targets and measures for that annually will get us to 5 years from now being in the goal area for each one of these objectives. I'll just give you a quick highlight in each of the areas. So under climate and culture, our work is to engage families, community partners in creating a safe, inclusive, vibrant, and adaptive learning environment that supports all students in realizing their full potential as productive and successful members of our community. In our teaching and learning objective, our goal is to strengthen students' pre-K to 12 roadmap to college and careers through high-quality core curriculum and robust multi-tiered systems of support within each school. Our third objective, which is tied to professional learning, is develop high-quality professional learning experiences for all our staff that are relevant, purposeful, and systematic, structured with the goal of improving and building upon educators' practices and student outcomes. Our fourth objective, which is around our CTE, or career and technical education, our goal is to expand those offerings for students and create the infrastructure and policies to support continued expansion that would allow us to tuition students into our CTE programs. And then fifth is communication, to communicate timely and intentionally with students, families, staff, and the community to create and deepen an intentional, inclusive, and transparent culture. So all of the work to support those objectives is built into our budget. One of the things that I ask of our administrators is that whenever they want something new or they're asking for more funding, that they can tie it directly to the goals in the strategic plan. And that is inherently part of how we budget for our programming for the next year. I do want to highlight a couple of budget drivers for next year. As you know, COVID has impacted our students in many ways, but one of the ways that is being demonstrated this year, not just in our district, but in districts across the state, is in increased needs, both social, emotionally, and academically. And we have had to put more students in out-of-district placements than typical. And so there's been an increase in that number both for this current year and we anticipate for the following year. We're in the third year of a 5-year transportation contract, which has a 3% escalator in it. Since that's such a large cost, it does have an impact on our bottom line. We will be in contract negotiations with our teachers union for next year. And then we have been experiencing healthcare, dental, and life insurance increases, and we anticipate that to continue for FY24. In addition to an increase in professional services for our special education students. So these are typically services that might have been provided to a small population of students, which have expanded to larger populations of students, again, because of the needs that we're experiencing coming out of COVID. So those are just some drivers that have impacted next year's budget. I'm sorry, these numbers are so small, but you also have it in your packet. It's a little easier to read in your packet. These are our proposed budget expenditures for next year. You'll see 2 columns there. Our FY23 projected, those are based on our current budget numbers, looking at what the school committee originally adopted, where we are today, and where we project we'll be at the end of 23. followed by a column that shows you our proposed budget for FY '24, and then the change both in dollars and in percent overall. And I'm sure we can come back to that page for some more questions, but I'll just take you to the last page, which is around our budget revenues. So you see our FY '23 projected revenues, again, in the first column, followed by the proposed FY '24 budget, the change in dollars, and also the change in percent. I'll take you down to really the bottom line, which is an increase of our budget from $58,120,882 to $58,931,498 for a change of $810,616, which is a 1.39% increase over last year's budget. That was due to a lot of efforts within our staff to keep costs down, to look at what we're doing today, how it's working, what we can do to improve it for next year, and also maximizing our last year of ESSER III funding. And I am sure you will have plenty of questions. I am happy to respond to each of those. I'll just suggest, unless you would rather I go through the changes on the expenditures and give a little explanation before folks ask questions, whatever you think would be more beneficial, Tim.
Great.
Think that would be good? Okay. So I flipped you back one slide here to the expenditures, and we'll just go through each one of the categories. So if you look at salaries, you'll see a very small increase in there. Part of that is due to some reductions in staff based on retirements. We don't have any planned cuts to the budget in staff. These are just some of the natural attrition with some funding built in, of course, for the increase built into our contracts, which includes steps and raises for our Council 94 staff who are in the middle of their contract. Employee benefits, again, although we'll be losing some staff due to attrition, there is an increase there, and that's we projected a 5% increase in healthcare. Hopefully we come in right around 5%, although I am hearing the number may be a little higher than that. So I'm a little, that one might be a little tight there. We're at 5%. Professional services, you see an increase. This speaks directly to what I was talking about for students who are currently in district but receive additional services. These are funds that we use to pay for BCBAs, which are behavior specialists, which come in to support both students and staff in dealing with, out of the ordinary student behavior. This also supports some of our extra attention for students who are out of district and might require a one-to-one aid. That also comes out of this funding because those aren't our employees. They belong to whatever the out-of-district school is, but we have to pay for those services through our budget. When you skip down to property services, you see an increase there. Really, that $82,000 is based off our bid for a proposal to do some grounds. We have a new groundskeeping contract that we went out for. There's an increase there. We had typically been doing our Warren properties either ourselves or in concert with the town, but that's becoming a little bit overwhelming, and so we have gone out to bid for a contract for someone to do the services. So that's that additional increase there of about 9%. In other purchase services, you see that $219,000, a 2.95% increase. That's our transportation increase. It's a 3% on the contract. Most of that line is our transportation contract. Supplies. This is actually a pretty modest increase. And most of this is coming directly from our schools. And I'm going to tell you the bulk of the increase was the increase in paper costs. So the price of paper has gone up quite a bit this year. And our schools were already getting a little worried about how they were going to get paper, but they've done a good job of adjusting. But we've built in a small increase in the supply line to adjust for the increase in cost of regular supplies. In our property line, you actually see a decrease there. That was some additional money that was budgeted in case we had more work to do on our facility at the Reynolds Building, but we are good to go if you haven't visited yet. It's a beautiful building and doesn't require any work, so really the funding in that line is not as necessary as it was the previous year. Our miscellaneous line, really that decrease that you see there of the $101,000, there was some money set aside in these miscellaneous lines for a legal settlement that the district was awaiting. That happened this year. We don't currently have anything in the wings and are anticipating that we will need more funds in that, so we've dropped that amount in that last line. And then finally, it's nice to see our debt service is continuing to decrease as we are closing down. I think 2028 is the end of our debt service. And so we are seeing just a small decline in that amount. So that accounts for the changes in the expenditures. I'll take quickly through the changes in the revenues. So our FY23 projected revenues and federal revenues is really our Medicaid reimbursement. I'm sure you don't remember this, but actually Tony had proposed a $500,000 projection in Medicaid revenues. That is not what it looks like it's coming in. So I've reduced that line to $350,000 because that's about what I anticipate based on what we've recouped to date. And so I kept that number steady for next year. I don't anticipate that we would be getting more than that amount. Our state aid has gone up about just under 2% for next year. Housing aid is pretty flat for next year. That's our reimbursement on any projects that we did that were approved by the state in previous years. Local revenue sources, this is another line. Tony, I think, had proposed around 240,000. I've dropped that down to 184,000. Most of that money comes from money we collect from tuitions from other students or any rental of our facilities and some interest on our debt. And then you'll see the two town appropriation projections. So for Bristol, there is a request for an increase of 522,000, which results in about a 1.82% increase for the town of Bristol. The town of Warren appropriation is also an increase of about 522,000. For the town of Warren, that's about a 3.79% increase. This is based on our formula, a 13-year rolling average of students. So what happened in the percentages for that is, although we've lost students, we have lost more Bristol students in terms of percentage than we have Warren students. So it keeps that number not evenly distributed because it's based on the percent of the ratio between the number of students lost and the number of students gained. In our case, unfortunately, lost in both towns. And then so for a total town appropriation increase of 2.46%, which incredibly is the exact same percentage as last year. That was not on purpose. That's just the way it worked out. Last year, the increase was 2.46%. That's what it is this year, and the next, I do want to point out the budgeted use of fund balance you see there. So as in review of the budget, two things came into play. So you may, of course, I know Kate and Steve both know this, we project our budget based on the governor's recommended budget. Then the General Assembly actually doesn't pass the budget until late June, if we're lucky. One year it was September, hopefully in June, and then the numbers may fluctuate. So last year what happened was the governor actually used closer to the true enrollment numbers and decreased state aid, but bulked up in some of the other categoricals. Then the General Assembly decided to hold everyone harmless on enrollment, and so Bristol Warren actually saw an increase of about $800,000. Even with that increase of $800,000, we are still intending to use about $500,000 of fund balance to make budget this year. And I just want to highlight that for you and point out what some of those increases were. So I pointed out two areas where Tony's revenues were slightly off and we had to decrease them, which was a loss of about $250,000 in revenues right off the bat. And then when we did the budget last year, we had not finished negotiations with Council 94. So then after negotiations with Council 94, salary lines had to be adjusted. That was about another $400,000. There was a health increase that was a little more than we had projected, which was an additional $200,000. And then about $600,000 in additional special ed students who were placed out of district. So really, we used all of that $800,000 on increased costs in addition to still having to go to fund balance for this year. So I just wanted to highlight that in case you were thinking that I was sitting on $800,000 somewhere. We are not. We have had to use it to make budget and still need some fund balance. These were just some unexpected things that we were not prepared for during last year's building of the budget, both with Tony only having been here about 6 months, and I think I had been here less than 6 weeks when we put together this budget last year. So I think we are in a good financial position moving forward, and I think that we will be able to maintain where we are and still continue to make our goals that we've set for the district. I hope that you saw our scores. We had some really big highlights. We had the highest growth in the state in terms of English SATs. It has really motivated our faculty and our math team to now make the scores, match that in math, in addition to our K-8 staff really working very hard to continue to increase our RICAS scores and our ELA and math scores. We really want to keep moving forward and not just close those COVID gaps, but get to an even better place for our students than we were before. Happy to answer any questions or.
Do any of my colleagues have any questions at this time? Anybody? Okay. No questions at this time.
Okay.
You weren't kidding, 5 to 7 minutes, huh? That's
Listen, the rule is keep it simple.
excellent.
Well, I do have one question, and
course.
I know one of the drivers is transportation.
Mhm.
And I was just curious if you are looking into any sort of audits or any sort of ways to kind of monitor that on a wider level.
We are. So actually in preparation, so believe it or not, even though we're just wrapping up year 3, we do want to spend next year preparing for going out to bid for our next 5-year contract. So we are going to audit our ridership, look at the utilization, and one of the things that I do hear from the community and families is, I see buses and they look empty. And I just want to remind folks that our bus contract is based on a set number of buses per day. And so buses that are filled on our middle school run may look empty on our high school run, but we're paying for those buses anyway. So we just try to make it as convenient as possible for students. So even though you might see lower ridership, of our older students, it's because our contract holds us accountable to an X number of buses. And so, but we are looking at even those buses and looking to see what the ridership looks like. During COVID, when we asked parents to bring their children to school because we didn't have the capacity on all of our buses, I think people have gotten into that habit. And so we want to get people away from that habit and back to riding the buses and really utilizing, especially the last 2 years of our contract, so that we can best utilize the space and keep those traffic patterns moving in the morning. If you've been at some of our schools in the morning, you know that sometimes we back out onto some of the main roads, and we want to try to avoid that. I know Kate and the Warren PD are very patient because we sometimes are on 103 all the way out in the morning and in the pickup. So we really want to try to encourage parents to put their students on the bus and take down some of those traffic lines.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Mr. Chair,
Of course.
on the transportation
Yes,
subject, we had talked at the legislative priorities breakfast here a month or so ago. You had brought forward an idea about streamlining or changing the column that we're in, the group that we're in for transportation out of district. And I know that's been sort of bandied about a bit. Can you talk about that and whatever came of that great idea?
So we did propose that to our legislatures. They did put forward some legislation, but I think they were asked to send it to study to look at the impact of changing that transportation region. And we have received some questions, so thank you for asking that. I want to be clear that those transportation regions are only for our private school students and our CTE students. They are not for our special ed out-of-district students. We are required to transport those students regardless of where they are in the state. Actually, we even have a couple out of state. We are required to provide that transportation. The region would change us from Region 5 to Region 2, which would put us in the East Bay group. That just seems to make more sense, since if you look at Bristol, Warren, in any other category for the state of Rhode Island, we're in the East Bay, except for our transportation region. So they have pledged to look at those regions, not just for Bristol, Warren, but for everyone who's in those regions. So I think that's where we left it. They're going to study the regions.
So there is willingness in the legislature to look at the whole entire, all of the different groups
Yes.
to maybe make them more equitable and put them together with each other, because it just doesn't make any sense that we should be in a group that is not part of the East Bay.
Right. And I am great. Our legislators did put forward the legislation, so I
Yeah.
am thankful to them. They listened
Yeah.
to us. We asked them, we shared with them our priority, and they did bring it forward. So I really appreciate their willingness to do that on our behalf.
Thanks for the update.
I just had a question in regards to, I know the tuition to charter schools is up about 126%. And do you feel that that is going to be a continued trend where we're going to see a lot of that tuition money going to the other schools?
So Dr. Santa and I were just discussing this, and some of the things we're talking about is the more we improve and the better we get, the less reasons parents would have to want to leave our schools. That is definitely something that's in our, it's in our view, and we're working towards. We don't want parents to think they need another option. We want to be their best option. In terms of our CTE students, part of growing our own CTE program is to balance out some of the students who tuition out. There are programs that we may never be able to house here in district. We will probably never have an automotive program for students. However, we have an amazing construction program. It's actually pretty full right now with our own students. We had just over 60 students in our program this year. Looking at expanding our programs and inviting students from other districts. We hope that at some point we'll balance that out so that kids who may leave us to go to an automotive program will attract students who want to be in a construction program to our program. So the goal is to create programs that our students really want and are interested in, and then attract the other students to do that. So that whenever we lose students to a program that we may not offer, we'll also gain students. So that's what we're working towards.
That's great, thank you. And I've heard the student resource officers from the police department are extremely valuable. Have you found that there's been a growing need for more of them, or another, I know Brody's very popular.
Brody
I mean-
is very popular.
I mean-
I really think we could be a road show and be a model for lots of other districts because I mean,
You never
really, Canine Brody is amazing. So is Keith, the officer who works with him. I don't want to leave him out. Poor Keith, I think everybody says, "Hi, Brody," before they realize he's attached to Keith. So Keith gets the second greeting. But it really is an amazing model. So Keith does our elementary schools in Bristol. And just the idea of having that canine connection, that dog-child connection, that's addressing some of our SEL needs. So some of our social and emotional needs for our younger students get addressed just by having some time with Brody. It really is an awesome model. And our SROs in both middle and high school are true partners in the work that we do. I have spoken to other districts, and they're always kind of thinking about whether they want to continue the program or not. I don't have any doubt in this community, in both of our communities, that they are true supports and additions to our programs. They are members of the school community and are seen by the students as a positive role model and a positive connection, which I think is the goal of SRO programs. So I really think we have a model program.
Good.
First, I'd just like to say that wonderful job preparing the budget, especially considering you don't have a CFO. It's amazing that you were able to pull this all together. And just a quick question about your level of comfort with the governor's projected state aid, and whether you're hearing in your professional circles if the legislature is going to propose something else, or if the governor's numbers are pretty solid.
So the only thing that we're hearing that might be a little different is the General Assembly is looking at the funding formula. However, they're still talking about what they might do to the funding formula. So I don't know that we should be ready to anticipate a big change in that. The big piece that would help us would be if they did enact going from, right now the success factor is 40%. So based on our free and reduced lunch numbers, our students who qualify for SNAP and TANF, we get 40% on the per student for those students. So we get that additional funding. They are talking about raising that to 42%. So raising that to 42% would definitely increase the funding that we got per pupil for our students who qualify for those supports. I do worry at some point that the General Assembly will shift to moving us back to our current enrollment without staging that out. We've been getting kind of a buy on enrollment for the last few years because of COVID. They've been holding everyone harmless. And my hope and what I've been sharing both in my circle and with anyone in the General Assembly who listen is that when they do decide that they're not going to hold us harmless anymore, that it's not rip off the Band-Aid in 1 year and that that's staged out over time. I would anticipate, Kate, and this is my best guess, is if the General Assembly makes a change, we'll maybe gain in formula aid and lose in categorical. I'm hoping that at worst, we would be neutral. That's my hope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Going around the room, any other questions or comments? Anybody like to share anything?
It's a quick question.
Councilwoman Perrella?
I think I know the answer to this, but are you having an issue with the free reduced lunch? Some of the urban districts are really having tremendous problems because they're, I forget what it's called, but the community.
Mary, could you just
Can't hear.
pull your mic in? We can't hear you.
Oh,
Thank you.
sorry. Bring it closer. I forget what it's called, but it's called like the community, like the whole school will be like approved. And then there's no incentive for the families to send back the forms. And so the numbers have gone from like maybe in some of the schools I'm familiar with, close to 80% down to 60. It's a huge problem. I don't think it'd be an issue here, but I'm just curious.
It's not, we don't qualify for community eligibility for lunch programs, but those districts who do are definitely struggling. Our goal this year, since this was the first year in 3 years that we began collecting lunch forms again, was to make sure that the families who qualified did those lunch forms and got those into us. So we did have a big push at the beginning of the school year, and the business office continues to look out for looking at student lunch debt and then checking in with families and making sure if there is some debt, that do they know they have the debt, number one, and if they do they need some support? Have they filled out the form? Is there something we can do to help them? So I think our principals and our business office have done a nice job of collecting our forms. We're at about where we were pre-pandemic with our lunch forms, so I think we're probably on target.
Yeah, because that was the other part of the problem. Certainly was, the universal free lunch during the pandemic and getting people back into that.
Right. Thank you.
That's good. Thank you.
No, just another comment and kind of echoing what we talked about last year, is to say thank you again, to have a clean, well thought out presentation to the point, which is what we're supposed to look at. A reasonable ask. I know I sit with a lot of people that have been here for quite a long time, and the reasonable ask is so important. We can tell that you put the hard work in. We can tell that this is also not easy, and we appreciate that. So as much as we can sometimes say it's difficult, it's also important to say thank you. So thank you. Thank you to all, the school committee and all, for putting this in front of us. Certainly we have some things to look at and chew on, and we have another meeting to discuss more, but as it looks right now for myself, thank you, and this is much easier to support. So
Thank you.
Any other comments? Anybody else share before we wrap up? Good. Good. Thank you very much, the school committee, Superintendent Riley. Thank you for your hard work. We appreciate it. Very clear, easy to understand. We have definitely all the information we need to absorb it and munch on it for the next 2 weeks before we come back on the 23rd. And if we have any questions to email you, is that best, or call you?
Yes, I was just going to say, you don't have to wait 2 weeks. If you have questions, please contact me. I'm happy to walk you through. If someone wants to go through the detail, I'm happy to meet with anyone and walk through the detail. I went over the big object numbers. We can go through it by detail. If someone wants to look a little deeper, I'm happy to meet with anyone or respond via email or phone call, whatever works best for you.
Excellent, excellent. All right. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
First by Nicolo and seconded by Aaron. Great. Let's all signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. Thank you very much. We'll see you on the 23rd. Thank you.
Ed.